What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Everything you need to know before week 1. This is usually going to be the Saturday video, but there's no waiver wire, no trade videos this week, so the schedule is just a little bit off. But basically, what I want to do is just go over the important news and maybe some depth chart situations that people might need a little bit more clarity on. So, let's start things off with the Chargers backfield. As of recording this, the latest news with Melvin Gordon is that the contract is not going to get done during the season, and honestly, a trade is also unlikely. The Chargers are asking for a first-round pick next year, and I believe also a mid to late round pick as well, which is just far more than any team is going to give up. They'd be giving up these picks for the right to pay Melvin Gordon a bunch of money, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, the Eagles offered Jordan Howard and a mid-round swap. That's not even close to what the Chargers were asking for, and so they shot that down. The most likely outcome here still remains that he sits out until around mid-season. A lot of people are estimating week 10 is when he can return and still accrue a season. Any longer than that, and he'll have to hold out for yet another year. So he's going to return at some point. We just don't know exactly when, but it's looking like around mid-season to week 10. This means that Eckler and Jackson are both going to be matchup-based plays, with Eckler being a little bit more of that flex option to weekly running back 2, unless we see them do something different than what we expect. So on that note, the Chargers head coach said that he plans on using them as a tandem, and there are reports that this could be close to a 50-50 split. I would be shocked if they didn't use it as a tandem. That's just not what they want to do. Like, neither of these guys is a featured back, so it makes complete sense to use a committee. I don't believe, however, that it's going to be 50-50. The preseason showed us, and last year showed us, that Eckler is just going to get more snaps and more touches than Jackson. And I believe that that's the correct move. That doesn't mean it's going to be like 80-20 or 70-30, but I think 60-40 is a really good expectation of what we're going to see. That makes Eckler more of that running back 2 to flex play this week, with Jackson being a little bit more thin of a play. But let's be honest, I highly doubt you need to use Jackson as your flex option. Speaking of committees, let's move on to the Eagles. Now, they've come out and said, yeah, we're using a committee system at running back. I do expect this to be true early in the year, so weeks 1, 2, 3. I do expect them to use Howard, use Sanders, and to use Sproles, which is why Sanders is more of a flex play to start the year, even in what's an incredible matchup. They're massive favorites. They've got a great offensive line playing a terrible defense. This is a week you want to start their running backs. So I get it if you want to use Sanders in the flex. Just know that if you're watching this game, you're going to be wondering why clearly the best running back is not being featured, because he's not going to be featured to start the season. Let's get halfway through the season, then they're probably going to switch to that, which is why he might be a really nice buy low if he happens to not score a touchdown in maybe weeks 1 and 2. Maybe they score a lot of points, doesn't score a touchdown in weeks 1 and 2. That's going to be a really nice trade option. Ezekiel Elliott is next. The contract is finally signed. He's now a very rich man, and the Cowboys have their running back of the future. Now, this is a massive blow to Pollard, who can still be kept as a handcuff, but whose weekly value is now minimal. He's gonna have a third down role, not the third down back. He's not Chris Thompson. He's not Theo Riddick, but he's gonna have a role on some third downs, and especially in the first few weeks, I don't expect Zeke to just step in and take 100% of the snaps, especially because they like Pollard. They think he's a good player, and he is a good player. He's a great option on third downs. But you're never going to be starting Pollard unless Zeke gets hurt. Still a guy to keep in case that happens, because he's probably a high-end 2 to a low-end 1 if Zeke's just declared out for the rest of the year due to an injury. But you're starting Zeke in every matchup, and you just can't start Pollard unless he gets hurt. Let's move on to the Cardinals, and they've listed Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, and Michael Crabtree as their 3 starting wide receivers. Now, Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk were obvious. We knew that was going to happen. But Crabtree is a bit of a surprise. Now, these depth charts are wrong all the time, so take it with about a pound of salt. Keyshawn Johnson had a great camp, looks like a really good receiver, and I also expect Isabella to be on the field at times. Now, this offense is built to sustain a good number of wide receivers, especially with the talk that 4 wide receiver sets might be their base package. They might use that more than anything else. And this is especially true with them just getting rid of Ricky Seals-Jones. They're just not going to really use a tight end. They're using 4 wide receivers and a running back on a ton of plays. So you starting Crabtree or Keyshawn Johnson or Andy Isabella? No, of course not. But watch this game. I mean, honestly, this is the game that I want to watch probably the most this week because there's so many questions that are going to get answered. I mean, are they going to go as fast as we think? Are they going to throw as much as we think? What is their base set? Is it 4 wide receivers? How often are they targeting these different players? How creative does it look? How good does Kyler Murray look? And are they able to force other teams to keep up with them, resulting in basically a shootout every single week? So definitely pay attention to this game. But honestly, Kirk is probably the only wide receiver I'm starting. You could start Larry Fitzgerald. I don't own him. I doubt that anyone owns him as a wide receiver too. So just put him on the bench and just see what happens in week 1. But remember, they started slow this preseason because they ran like 5 plays. They didn't show us anything of what this actual offense is going to look like. So you're starting Kyler Murray, you're starting David Johnson, and you're starting Christian Kirk because they're good players and they're going to be used heavily in the offense. Let's move on to the Texans, and Keke Coutee is listed as the starter in the slot for week 1. So the depth chart remains Hopkins, Fuller, Keke, which means Stills is now the 4. This also indicates that he's good to go after the ankle injury. Like I said above, you can't always trust these depth charts, but it's at least a good indication if you own Keke, he's good enough to go in this game. This is another game that I'm very interested to see. It's the first Monday night game. Remember, there are 2 Monday night games in week 1. It currently has the highest total, although I believe it has been bet down just a tad. But regardless, Vegas thinks this game could shoot out. And I'm very interested to see the Texans offense. They're set up to throw the ball a ton with Duke and Hopkins, Fuller, Keke, Stills their top option with a not so great offensive line, even with the addition of Laramie Tunsil. So if we're going to have Watson dropping back and throwing the ball 50 times, I'm excited to see that against the Saints. Next, we'll do the 49ers, and their official depth chart has Breida over Tevin Coleman. Now, like I've just said, this doesn't mean a whole lot. These depth charts don't matter, but it's definitely interesting to see. Breida was great last season, and he was the better of the 2 of them in camp. So I wouldn't be shocked at all if this ended up being true. However, I'm still expecting a pretty close to 50-50 split. Could it be 55 in one person's favor? Sure. But I think they're roughly going to split snaps to start the year, which makes both of them flex options in a great matchup against Tampa Bay. Odell Beckham Jr. is good to go with the hip injury. You were never benching him, but now you don't even need to temper expectations. He's got an incredible matchup this week. There is not a cornerback on the Titans that can keep up with him, and he could absolutely explode in his first game with Baker. This is one that I definitely want to watch as well, which is not something we've been able to say about a Titans and Browns game in recent years. All right, let's talk about Kansas City. Now, Damian Williams has been the starter all offseason, and that hasn't changed with McCoy signing. What has changed is the weekly floor. They now have Williams, McCoy, and Thompson as a committee, which hurts the value on all of them. The signing hurts Thompson more than it hurts Williams, who was the clear backup and was going to get work every week, but now he's 3rd in the pecking order, which limits his touch upside each week. McCoy is now 2nd, and although he averaged just 3.7 yards per carry across his last 448 carries, putting together 2 of the worst seasons of his career in 2017 and 2018, we know that individual running back talent matters far less than people think. What matters more than anything is the offensive line, the play calling, and how many defenders are forced to play in the box. So even though he is a shell of his old self, that doesn't matter that much playing on the Chiefs, facing as few stacked boxes as he will, with very, very creative play calling. He can still be productive in this offense even if he's not as good as he used to be. For week 1, I'd absolutely keep him on the bench if you own him because it's a brutal matchup and we don't know exactly how many touches he's going to have. I'm expecting around 10, but is that 8 carries and 2 receptions? Is it all carries? Is it more like 6 carries and 4 receptions? I don't know. but we're going to find out. So there's no need to take the risk in starting him in the flex when there's no way you drafted him as a flex play. Lastly, we have Williams, and his value did take a hit after they signed McCoy. But realistically, we were never expecting him to get 20 carries and 5 receptions a game. That would be great if we were looking at this from 1 week. But if you're an owner of Damian Williams, you do not want him getting that sort of workload because he's gonna break down. So this signing isn't the end of the world for him because he can still produce running back 1 numbers with far less volume than that. Now, I'm not expecting him to produce those numbers. I'm expecting around 10 carries and around 4 to 5 targets a game, which is for sure less than we were hoping for this summer. But that sort of volume still makes him a starter in this offense, basically regardless of matchup, because of the massive touchdown upside and how high the volume is through the air, how many receptions and targets we're still expecting him to have. But remember, these are all just guesses. He could absolutely get closer to 12 carries and maybe 5, 6, 7 targets a game, which would make him much closer to a low-end running back 1. This week is obviously tough. It's a bottom 5 matchup against the Jaguars, especially on the road. So if you have better options, then you can go there. But I'm fine starting him this week because although the rushing volume will be lower, we don't really care about his rushing volume. 10 carries isn't all that different from 14 to 15 carries. It's the touchdowns and the receptions that we like with Williams, not whether he's going to get 45 or 62 rushing yards. I don't care. There's really no difference there. It's a point. But I want those touchdowns on the Chiefs roster, and I want those receptions from Patrick Mahomes because they're some of the highest value targets you can have. They still have a high team total this week, and I'll take Andy Reid with time to prepare over the Jaguars defense any day of the week. So lower expectations, but you can still start him. Let's move on to the Miami Football Club, and Kenyon Drake is expected to get, quote, a lot of touches. We've been expecting this to happen all year. Ballage, like I've said basically every video, was terrible last season, looked terrible in the preseason, and they have by far the worst offensive line in the league, and Drake's the pass catcher. You don't want Ballage on your team. Drake is the much better running back, so expect him to be the guy not only on the ground, but through the air. But that doesn't mean he's great in fantasy. This team is terrible. This line is terrible. So you're just banking on a touchdown. And this is a game where I expect at most 1 total touchdown from the Dolphins. So I'm not starting Drake even if I happen to own him, which I do not. Amari Cooper, practiced fully, looks good to go for week 1, and probably will not be on the injury report for week 1. You're starting him with confidence against the Giants, and I am expecting very big things from him this season. DK Metcalf looks actually like he's going to play this week, which is absolutely crazy. He had the knee scope like 2 weeks ago. You're not starting him because there's just no way he's fully healthy. There's no way he's going to even need a full allotment of snaps, given that the Seahawks can win this game with their backups. But I just wanted to tell you guys, like, he's probably going to be out there, which is crazy. But the skill position players you're starting in this offense are Tyler Lockett and Chris Carson. Those are the guys that the offense is going to run through this week. Let's hop on the other side. The Bengals left tackle, Cordy Glenn, has a concussion still and might miss week 1. The Bengals offensive line is just terrible. You're still starting Joe Mixon, but the Seahawks are a viable streaming defense this week, and Carson is looking like a very strong play, given the now 10-point spread, the largest of the week, and just how bad the Bengals are going to be on both sides of the ball. This is a team that you're going to want to start running backs and defenses against, especially while Green remains out. Darius Geis is expected to be Washington's lead back. The exact quote was, "The offense, carry-wise, will pretty much go through him." Now, I don't own Geis on any of my 3 teams, but if I did, I still probably wouldn't start him. I'd be very encouraged by this quote and very excited about the potential to start him going forward, but this is such a bad matchup. This offense is bad. This line is bad. They're going to be down so much. This is more of like a Chris Thompson game, who you're also not starting, but I want to start Geis in games where they at least have a chance, and they don't have a chance to win this game. So keep him on the bench, watch the game, see how much they use him, because he looked decent in the preseason. If he's good to go, he could be a pretty nice pick this season. Cam Newton should be good to go this week. That's great news for anyone invested in this offense. If you've got McCaffrey, you've got Moore, you've got Samuel, you're very excited that his injury was not major at all. And this should be a really good game to watch. I keep saying that because I'm very excited for football, but this is one of those games that could shoot out. There are a lot of fantasy relevant players on both sides of the ball, and you're basically starting everyone. I mean, you're starting McCaffrey, obviously. You want Moore and Samuel because it's a consolidated target share. You're starting Brandon Cooks in every matchup. You're starting Kupp. You're starting Woods. You're starting Gurley. And you can start the quarterbacks, although, like I said in yesterday's video, there are more of low-end ones this week because there's a potential the game doesn't shoot out. But if it does shoot out, oh my goodness, this game's going to go off for fantasy. Lastly, we've got my guy Stefon Diggs. Unfortunately, has another lower body injury. This time it's a hamstring injury. He has suffered an incredible amount of soft tissue and lower body injuries in his very short career. Absolutely keep an eye on this. I actually don't own him in any leagues this season, and I'm recording this on Thursday. So when you're listening to this, you might have more information available to you than I do. Just make sure to check on his status before Sunday. You, of course, don't want to start a player who's not playing, but especially with hamstrings, if he can't practice Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and then he's questionable going into Sunday, but then he's all of a sudden a start, like he's playing the game, but he didn't practice at all, honestly, bench him. Because hamstring and groin injuries are not something you mess with, especially with someone who has a history of them. So if he's not practicing, but then he's in, listen, you've got a full bench. This is week 1. There are very few injuries. No one's on bye. You probably have someone you can put in there at the wide receiver 2 or the flex spot. So if he's gimpy going into the week, I don't want to start him. However, if he comes back and practices today, he practices Friday, he's good to go. He's on the injury report, the hamstring, but he's good to go in the week. Then start him because maybe they just pulled him out for tightness. Again, I don't have 100% of the information because some of that's in the future and I don't have a time machine. Actually, there's one more name we need to talk about. This video was already done, and then of course the news came out that Antonio Brown is going to be suspended. We have no idea how long yet, but it looks like, at least right now, he's going to miss this week. So of course, if you want Antonio Brown, then you're not starting him while he's suspended. It doesn't really help out everyone else that much. The Raiders are playing the Broncos, which is not a great matchup, and although this helps out Tyrell Williams, it helps out Hunter Renfrow, it helps out Josh Jacobs, like you're still probably starting Jacobs, and you don't need to start Renfrow or Tyler Williams. It's not like they're just going to be peppered with targets now. Sure, Renfrow could rack up a few receptions, but this isn't a matchup I want to target, so just stay away from the offensive players that aren't Josh Jacobs or Darren Waller if you really need a tight end. Like if you're someone who just skipped out on tight end entirely and you're like, dude, I just need someone. Yeah, you can go to Darren Waller. He's probably going to get a few targets. He could score a touchdown. It's not a terrible option. Tight end's not that great anyways, so realistically, you're not going to be that bad off starting Waller. But you're definitely not starting Carr now, and again, I really don't think you need to start Tyrell Williams or Renfrow. So that's all the things you need to know before week 1 of the fantasy football season. If you'll want to check out my full rankings for all positions, check it out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.